Hey folks, and welcome to week 1 of Comp 2. Today we're going to be talking about understanding argument and what argument is, what it isn't, and how we use it in academic settings. So let's start off with the fact that argument is all around us. Arguments appear in every medium and genre. We see arguments in everything from the t-shirt you put on in the morning to the sports column that you read, or even the bumper sticker on the car in front of you. Argument can be text, anything that's written, spoken, oral, or visual that expresses a point of view. And most obvious as arguments are those that make direct claims based on or drawn from evidence. So here's just an example up here. Alyssa Milano did not start the Me Too movement, but she tweeted this on October 15th, 2017. And she just said, if you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write Me Too as a reply to this tweet. And what happened is women all over the United States, all over the world really, shared Me Too as a hashtag, as a tweet, as a Facebook post, all over all kinds of social media. And a lot of people who maybe didn't understand how big of a problem sexual harassment or assault was for women, all of a sudden got, a lot more information about the argument that, yes, this is really a big deal. Now, if you're looking at argument as an academic student, one thing that I want you to be aware of is that it's very important to read arguments critically and rhetorically. And we're going to talk about what these two terms mean. So let's talk about rhetoric first, or what it means to read something rhetorically. A lot of times when we hear rhetorical, we think rhetorical question or like a question that makes you think. But rhetoric has actually been around for a really long time. The study of rhetoric started more than 2 millennia ago. Aristotle told students that they needed to know and understand the use of the art of rhetoric for 2 major reasons. They needed to be able to get their ideas across effectively and persuasively, and they also needed to be able to protect themselves from being manipulated by others. So Aristotle here was one of the first teachers of rhetoric, and he believed that all adults needed to learn rhetoric because he lived in a democracy. And he thought, hey, if you're going to have a say in how the government of this country works, you need to be able to communicate effectively and be aware when others are trying to make you believe something. Now, is there really a need for this in today's society? Obviously, we have a much different culture than Aristotle did 2,000 years ago, but the answer is yes. We still definitely need an understanding of rhetoric. There's actually a class that they teach at the University of Washington. Professor Carl Bergstrom and Jevin West teach this class, and the class is called Calling Bullshit, and it's basically a study in how people use data or manipulate data, specifically statistics, to make people believe things. And so it's just kind of interesting to see how much we still need this sort of education today. Now, a lot of times we hear the term fake news in the media, in society, and yes, there is a lot of information out there that is not accurate. And one of the things that we're going to work on this semester is how to figure out if something is or isn't accurate, or is or isn't fake news. So one of the things that you can do to sort of defend yourself against fake news is to pay attention, very close attention to what you are reading. You know, it's very tempting to kind of skim or not pay attention to what we're reading, especially maybe, when the stakes are high, we need to make sure that we are paying attention. So keep focused on the text at hand and keep your critical antenna up. Keep an eye out for clickbait, especially when you're looking for sources of research and stuff like that. We will talk more about sources throughout this semester, but a lot of times you'll see a headline that seems perfect. You'll click on the article and you'll realize, like, hey, maybe this doesn't have what I thought that it had in it. Be skeptical. Check the author. Check the publisher. Check the sources. How reliable are they? And then look for unstated assumptions behind the claims and question them. Always ask yourself, what is this person trying to make me believe and why? Distinguish between facts that have verifiable support and claims and those which may or may not be completely empty. Be especially wary of facts presented with no interpretation. Somebody can say, hey, these are the facts, but if they don't have the research to back it up, that should be a huge red flag. Excuse me. Learn to triangulate. Don't take the word of a single source, but rather look for corroboration for other reliable sources. This means if you find something in one source, go look for that same piece of information in other sources and make sure that everybody is reporting it the same. And this way you can kind of get a bigger picture of whatever it is that you're looking at. Become a fact checker. Get familiar with nonpartisan fact checkers like PolitiFact or factcheck.org or the Sunlight Foundation or even Snopes.com. If you read something and you're like, I don't know if this is true, do your homework and go find out if it is true. Go look at a fact checker, or better yet, go look at more than one fact checker. Now, I want to pause for a minute because I've just given you a lot of information on how to be really skeptical. But I do want you to understand that it's important to listen to an argument rhetorically, but also with a stamp of openness. So, obviously rhetoric is either you convincing somebody of something or them trying to convince you of something. So when you read, when you hear news, when you hear information, ask yourself, what are they trying to convince me of? But be open-minded. It's a good idea to recognize that we often exist within a sort of worldview echo chamber. And what I mean by that is we often inhabit, especially online, areas where we hear only from people who think exactly as we do. Excuse me. So, for example, if you're liberal, you probably get your news from liberal sources, and that's just constantly reinforcing what it is that you believe. But it's important that we get information from all different types of sources. This graphic here is from the website otherside.com, and you can actually meet with somebody who has a different belief about a particular issue than you do, and just discuss with them, why do you believe what you believe? What information has led you to believe that? And a lot of times we will find that we maybe have more in common with somebody than we thought we did. It's also important to understand your particular worldview, those values and beliefs that influence the way you see the world. You want to understand where they come from. You want to understand how they influence how you perceive information. Understanding your own worldview will really help you navigate in society. And there's some really cool tools here. isidewith.com is a website that will help you understand your political view. And then beliefnet.com, this quiz right here can help you identify your religious views. And so it's just kind of interesting to see how the views that we have might translate to a particular political party or a particular religious view or something like that. Now, let me say here that whatever your worldviews are, that's fine. We need people on all ends of the spectrum, but it is always important to recognize that your particular views, or even my particular views, influence the way we see the world. So it's just good to be aware of that. Okay, so why do humans make arguments? A lot of times when we hear the word argument, we have really negative connotations. We get, the ideas of people yelling at each other, or, belligerent tweets, or like people are so mean in the comments on social media, right? But argument is more than that. Humans use argument to identify, to explore, to solve problems. It's an important tool in our world that humans use. And we have different reasons for argument. Sometimes we have arguments to convince or inform. These are arguments that lead audiences to accept the claim as true or reasonable based on the information or evidence that seems factual and reliable. Sometimes we have arguments to persuade. These are arguments that go beyond convincing people and lead them to actually do something. So maybe I could, give you the argument that the beaches are dirty, and I could convince you that it is actually a problem. And then maybe I could go beyond that and I could persuade you to actually do something about it. And so we can see that these arguments can be very beneficial to the world. We also use arguments to make decisions. This can be situations like who to vote for in an election or what university to attend. A lot of times if you are a student that is approaching, a four-year institution, you will start getting brochures and catalogs and stuff like that in the mail advertising four-year universities. And this, it's meant to help you make a decision, and they make arguments about how their school is going to be best for you. Sometimes we have arguments to understand or explore. A lot of times we look at issues in a more open-ended way, and we just want to understand more about it. Sometimes we even have Rogerian arguments. This is a specific type of argument that approaches audiences in a non-threatening way, and really the goal is to find common ground and establish trust among those who disagree about issues. So maybe you feel one way about a particular issue and somebody else feels a different way. In a Rogerian argument, you would really seek to completely understand how your opponent feels and why. And then once you have that knowledge, then you can begin to have an argument or a conversation. We also have different occasions for arguments. These are when arguments pop up. Forensic arguments are arguments about the past. This is where we want to know what someone did in the past and for what reasons and with what liability. I just read a fascinating book called The Indifferent Stars Above about the Donner Party in the 1800s, and it was really interesting the way this book kind of dug up some information, and it just revealed the past to me in a different way, and it made an argument about who was responsible for the things that happened in that tragedy. These types of arguments include everything from speeding tickets to genocide. Did you do it? How did you do it? Why did you do it? Things like that. Then we have deliberative arguments. Deliberative arguments are arguments or debates about what will or should happen in the future. Often these arguments influence policies or legislation for the future. They answer questions that might be important to all of us, like should coal-fired power plants be phased out of our energy grid? Should all cars become electric cars at a particular point? So these types of arguments are sometimes hypothetical, but they help us move forward and make goals for what we could be or should be doing. And then lastly, we have epidictic or ceremonial arguments. These arguments really kind of explore the current values of society, a lot of times affirming it or either challenging its widely shared beliefs and core assumptions. So a lot of times we see these arguments made at public or even informal events such as, sermons, eulogies, memorials, these sorts of things. We also see them at more formal events like inaugural addresses or even graduation commencements. But they really help capture the zeitgeist or, the moment that's happening in a particular culture or society. We have different kinds of arguments. Arguments of fact, like did something happen? We have arguments of definition. What is the nature of the thing? So, a lot of times people will say they want amnesty for immigrants. Well, what exactly does amnesty mean to you? How do we define that? What is the nature of the human fetus? What are the boundaries of sexual assault? What is and what isn't sexual assault? All of these sort of definitions have to be defined by a particular society in order for us to make policy or legislation on these issues. We often hear arguments of evaluation. Did the person, idea, or thing meet the prescribed standards? Was the movie entertaining? Was the book good? Did the professor do a good job teaching the class? Things like that. And then we hear arguments of proposal. What actions should be taken? Or how do we move forward to solve this problem? Now, as you prepare arguments, which you will do this semester, all 3 of your essay projects will have some sort of argument element to them. And what I want you to really think about is appealing to your audience. And it's very important, whether in an academic setting or real life, to understand how your audience works. Text usually have an intended audience, somebody who you plan on reading this argument. Make sure that you're just considering that audience as you create a text. So you want to understand how your audience or how to persuade your audience. This is key in effective writing of all kinds, but especially in persuasive writing. An argument is an implicit dialogue or exchange with your audience. So in written arguments, it's always good to assume that there's a reader who will not agree with you. There's not a lot of point in writing an argument if you know your reader is going to be like, yes, 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 yes. So even if you know that your reader feels the same way, sometimes it works better to assume that your reader doesn't. You want to really know your audience. What is their position on the issue? How strongly do they feel about it? Are they open-minded enough to consider other views? And what will their objections be to your argument? Okay, so this is just kind of the beginning, the introduction to argument. We will be talking about it all throughout the course. If you have questions on anything that I covered in today's lecture, do not hesitate to ask. You can send me an email. You can comment on the class discussion board. But hopefully, as we progress through the semester, you will be an argument expert by the time that we get to the end of it. Have a great day, and I will talk to you soon, folks.